Today I have the pleasure of sitting down here at Black Diamond headquarters with Kollin and Ellen Powick. Kollin is known primarily for his work here at BD, where he began as the Director of Quality and has moved up to the Vice President of Products. Kollin's work started to become noticed by the everyday climber with the QC Lab series, where climbers could learn more about the strength and performance of the gear they were using. Although Ellen also has a notable engineering career, her impact on climbing has come out on the rock instead of here in the lab or at the design table. Ellen's skill on rock has reached a level that most climbers will never achieve. Her ascent of Pipe Dream in Maple Canyon made her the first Canadian woman to ever climb 514. Thank you guys so much for having me here today.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to start off by asking kind of what got you guys interested in climbing, how you started climbing, how your interest became, enough to make you want to go climb.
That's a good question. I've always been an outdoor person, and then after graduating university, I moved out west. We're from Canada.
Right.
So I moved to British Columbia, actually, and kind of fell in love with the mountains and realized getting to the top was what it was all about. And then you quickly learn that you got to build up the toolbox of skills in order to do that, from rock and ice and all that sort of stuff. So I just kind of fell in love with the landscapes and being up there. And that was separate, because Ellen started separate from me.
Yeah. So I grew up doing competitive gymnastics as a young kid for about 10 years. It was a big part of my life.
Yeah.
And I quit when I was around 15, and at that time I was always kind of searching for something to fill that gap. And I tried different sports, and I was never really very good at anything at all. And then many years later, probably about 10 years after I quit gymnastics, I had some friends introduce me to climbing in a gym, and it just clicked with me. And I think it was a lot of because of my background in gymnastics, and I had the body awareness, and it was like I loved it right from the very first day I entered that gym. So I started out in the gym because I was in Canada at the time, and it was winter, and eventually, some friends took me outside on a trip to Owens River Gorge. That was my first outdoor trip, and ever since then I've been
That's
full time.
awesome.
That was 26 years ago or something like that, a long time ago.
It really seems like gymnasts make the best climbers. Like
Yeah.
It really does, especially now that like competition climbing is becoming more and more prevalent. It sure seems that like a lot of the best competition climbers are, or the best hard climbers in general were gymnasts.
Yeah.
Like Margot Hayes is like a gymnast, and it seems like it really suits really well for
It translates
climbing.
really well, and not just I had a huge gap from when I quit gymnastics, but I still had this like body awareness and visualization and all these basic skills that you learn in gymnastics that are really, really helpful when it comes to climbing. So
That's
yeah,
cool. So
Maybe that's my problem, because I was never a gymnast.
maybe.
That's why I suck.
So how did you guys make it from Canada down to here in Salt Lake?
Yeah, so we got a little bit of a story, because we went to the same university but didn't really know each other.
Oh, okay.
And then later I started climbing and Ellen started climbing, and then we kind of re-met each other at a climbing gym, actually. And I recognized her as kind of a friend of a friend. And then we decided we would get married. Basically, that's how it went, like that, bam. So after we decided we'd get married, we wanted to go on a honeymoon trip. So we quit our jobs, got married, and then went on a 1-year honeymoon climbing trip the same week, like literally that pretty quick. And when we were traveling around for the year in the States, because there's a lot of winter in Canada, we thought we decided we would stay a little longer after the year was up. So we did the 1-year honeymoon, and then we thought, let's stay and have a longer rock climbing season. And that's how we ended up in Salt Lake. And we thought we would stay here for 1 to 3 years, and that was 23 years ago. Yeah, 23 years ago. We haven't left. So, because the climbing here is so good, and we needed jobs, and there's a city and the access, So yeah, we love it. We love it here.
Any stories from that 1-year honeymoon climbing trip that like still stand out?
I mean, lots. That was a great year. I mean, not working, and
Yeah.
just like full on the road climbing. And at that time, I had only climbed 511 when we went on that trip. And then by the end of the year, you improve a lot,
Yeah.
So, and we met lots of awesome friends that we're still friends with to this day, you know. So lots of, you know, some van challenges and, you know, stuff like that. But yeah, it was a great year.
And it was, you know, back then we didn't have our cell phones, and
Yeah.
we weren't
There's
on
no
the
internet.
We had collected all the guidebooks and all the magazines and brought them with us, and they would have little sections of different climbing areas, and we just went to all different kinds of places
Yeah.
and played on different types of rock and different, you know, not just destination places. We
Right.
went,
Yeah, little
we went
areas and
everywhere.
trad climbing
so
and
it was,
sport climbing
It was
and-
really
yeah.
good for our rock climbing experience and for building up a good base.
Any of those little areas that you found were like secret gems that you still remember that are like, man, that place was so much cooler than I ever thought it was going to be?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot. I mean, we ended up, you know, getting to the Red River Gorge and the New and stuff like that. But, and climbing through the winter is hard even in the States, right?
Yeah.
You know, we never made it to Waco. We're not really boulderers. But we went to Jack's Canyon, and this is back in like 1998.
Right.
You know, and it's just a kind of a little outdoor gym. And if
Yeah.
you go into it with the right attitude, and the weather was good, right around Christmas, we had a blast. We met people there that we're still friends with, and great camping, and yeah, I mean, there's lots of little places like that around.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
That's really cool. On kind of a different note, you guys recently went down to Ecuador on a trip.
Yeah.
And you went to Adrian Ballinger and Emily Harrington's wedding.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like it was a cool environment.
Yeah.
You know, I was only social media involved.
Yeah.
But sure seemed like a lot of different people were there.
Yeah.
And basically, I was wondering, for starters, you know, I know that there was a trip up Cotopaxi.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But basically, just who made it, who was all there. You
Yeah,
know,
that was a
stuff like that.
That was a fun trip. I mean, I've been in the game for a long time, you know, so we know all these guys
Yeah.
and girls. And we were fortunate enough, you know, Adrian and Emily are friends of ours, and they asked us to go. And it was so crazy, right? Because we'd never been on a guided trip before.
Right.
And Adrian owns a guiding company. So it was all, you know, you didn't have to think. You just show up. And there was people...
There's about 40 people doing Cotopaxi,
Yeah.
which was
Wow.
a lot, and
That's a
everybody
lot.
had
Huge group.
everybody
Yeah.
had a connection with Adrian and Emily, but everybody had really different experiences and backgrounds
so
when
fun.
it came to climbing. Like there were some full-on sport climbers that have never had crampons on. There were like North Face athletes who were skiers, obviously. There were family members, and there was a roommate of Adrian's who had never done anything like that. Like he
like
didn't,
this.
you know, like we were most of us are climbers.
But some of these
from
guys
some
weren't, you know, and
aspect,
had
Yeah.
Yeah.
never held an ice axe and never,
Yeah.
you know.
so it was really fun.
It was super fun.
Yeah.
And then
Really good experience.
and then all the guides were great, and it was just great. And then we all went to the beach for the wedding, and tons of new friends and old friends, and yeah, it was a really fun, relaxing trip. Yeah. Plus, during the pandemic, you know, a lot of us haven't seen each other because there's been no
Right.
trade shows and that kind of stuff. So just catching up with all these guys was really fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How'd the ascent of Cotopaxi go?
It was not pretty for me.
Well-
so we did not have a lot of time to acclimatize. I mean, I summited, which was great,
Yeah.
but it was not pretty.
Well, the bummer is, out of the whole trip, we had incredibly perfect weather except for summit day. And summit day was really windy, and it really beat people up.
Yeah.
And you get pretty high, you know. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, it's
Over
over 19, I
19,
think.
yeah.
Yeah. And we acclimatized, you know, not bad, but a lot of people. I mean, Ellen suffered pretty good. I love that. Yeah, it was awesome. She stuck it out. You don't usually do that well at altitude, really. I mean, we climbed Denali years ago before we got married, and you suffered there a little bit too. But
Yeah.
then, yeah, but people were suffering because it was windy and pretty cold and the altitude. But we had over, I think, 75% success rate. You know,
That's
out of
phenomenal.
the whole team. Yeah.
Out of a group of 40, that's
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
and
fantastic.
considering the conditions.
Yeah.
that's
And
very
some of the
good.
people like that didn't make it, they're like, "We're going back." You know, people were psyched. It was
That's
it was a
awesome.
fun trip. Yeah.
Yeah, what a unique wedding experience. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
You hear a lot of destination weddings, but not
Nothing
many
like
include
that.
No,
like
it
a,
was-
you
No,
know,
no.
a summit as well.
It was super fun. Yeah, it was a good time. Lots
Yeah,
of fun
I
people.
feel really lucky to have been able to go and
It was like a fantasy wedding. It was crazy.
That's awesome. And then how was the wedding itself down on the beach?
It was
that
insane.
Great.
Yeah, really fun.
Yeah.
Really nice and lots of fun people, and then DJs and parties, and yeah, it was really cool. Lots of surfing, surf lessons, yoga.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Little everything.
Yeah, it was wild. Yeah.
How long did you guys end up down there for?
2 weeks.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That seems like a great amount of time.
Yeah, it was fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So now I have a few questions for Kolin first, and then I'll come back for some questions for you. And, feel free, same thing, to hop in at any time if you have something to add or something he's forgetting, make sure to remind
you
him.
can straighten me up.
So, like I said, you started as the director of quality.
Guy,
yeah. And now you're the vice president of product, correct?
That's my
What's
title.
that? Yeah. What's that mean? What's it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've been at BD almost 20 years, so a long time. So I started as a quality guy, did that for 11 years. And we were much smaller then, it was a different beast. And then I transitioned and I was the head of the climbing division called the category director. Right. And then the last 2 years I've been the VP of product. So I've kind of seen a lot go on here. And right now, even all of those jobs, to be honest, I'm one of those guys that I don't really do anything. I have a lot of people that do all the work, so I don't even know where my week goes, but it's really busy and I'm always stressed out. But I don't actually, I'm not like designing the stuff or drawing the pictures or like, that sort of thing, but that's what the team does. So right now, as my title of VP of product, we have 5 business units in the company. There's climbing, the mountain category, backcountry skiing, footwear, and apparel. And all those business units and all those teams, they all report into me. So we all work together to try to create all the knickknacks and trinkets that people want. So
how has your job changed from being the director of the climbing category to now being,
Yeah, that's a great question. It's just a lot broader. So I used to be working really hand in hand with the design teams and saying, okay, let's work on this new harness or this new helmet. We want it to look like this, weigh this much. This is a competition, figuring out the actual products. I did that for a long time. And now it's a little bit more higher level, making sure that we make the right products, but find the right balance between, revenue generators and brand builders, like across everything. So I'm a mono-focused guy of climbing stuff is my thing. And then now it's trekking poles and headlamps and apparel and footwear and ski stuff and all that stuff. So now I have to open up my eyes to be way more in the details and that kind of stuff too.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself ever struggling, like wanting to focus more on that
For
climbing
sure.
stuff? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Having to be like, no, I have to put that aside.
Yeah, no, I'm a climber. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I get in all kinds of trouble around this place because I focus on the climbing stuff too much.
So, like I said before, I think people really started to learn about you from the QC Lab series. And well, for people who don't know, can you give a little rundown? And then in addition, I'd like to know what you think like the biggest impact for the everyday climber was from that.
Yeah, that wasn't really planned. It just kind of took on a life of its own because, we got a lot of smart engineering guys here and all the equipment and that sort of stuff. And we're out climbing all the time. So I see stuff that you kind of wish you didn't see. You see some sketchy stuff out there. So the idea was, just test some old gear and then throw it out there and let the world know to try to educate climbers, just little nuggets of info here and there. And it just started with, breaking some old slings. Because people ask, how long does rope last? Or how long, there's fixed draws. And is that beaner going to cut my rope? Or can I girth hitch a stopper? Like stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I just started doing it. And I always say, and all the write-ups are almost the same, it's not like a PhD level thesis. It's just a little nugget. And if people can take a little bit from that, take it away and hopefully make their day a little safer out there, that's kind of the goal. And it has got, really good reception and people love that stuff and people ask me questions all the time, like, because we climb a lot. I mean, Ellen's usually climbing at harder areas, but I'm always climbing at not so hard areas. And so I see all kinds of people and they recognize me.
They recognize his voice a lot.
Yeah.
And they come, is that Kolin from the QC Lab thing? Yeah. I've looked at all of his videos and they ask me questions. All the time.
A dog peed on my rope, is that okay? Or I did this, all the time. And, I don't know the answer necessarily, but help steer it or whatever. So it's just about trying to educate people so that they have these little nuggets of info when they're out there to be safer in the hills,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you find that people now continue to ask you, like in those situations, like a repeated question often over and over?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
what is the one you get most often when
Oh.
you're running into people out there?
Yeah, I don't know if I can think of that. It's usually, I guess generally it's usually about durability. Like how long does this sort of stuff last? And climbers are a different breed because they want things, really light, really strong, really durable, really cheap. It kind of
Right.
doesn't work like I'm like, I should have got in the road biking industry where you can just like charge whatever you want. But usually it's a durability thing, or like I dropped this, is it okay? Or these slinks look like this, is that okay? It's usually some sort of life expectancy question. Yeah.
And like you said, you don't know what it's been through. So are you just edging on the side of caution, asking,
For sure.
like, like these things have a limited life expectancy?
Yeah, yeah.
What are you answering those questions?
No, for sure. On the, everyone's responsible for their own
Right.
gear and their own. The second you leave the ground, it's dangerous, right? So you're kind of in your own hands. So I'm definitely playing the conservative card, and it's up to people to make their own decisions.
Right.
Based on what they know about these things. Climbing gear it's incredibly strong and durable, but I always say if you try hard enough, you can break anything, right?
Right.
So you can take a brand new piece of gear and in one day you can destroy it in the right circumstances. So you just got to keep your wits about you. And climbing's changed a lot in the 30 years I've been climbing and the 20 years I've been at BD with the growth of gyms. And frankly, a lot of these kid crushers are climbing 514 in the gym and they go outside and they don't know
Right.
stuff,
Yeah.
So trying to have these people understand, that it's not a gym outside.
Yeah.
It's a different deal. It's not an amusement park ride anymore. Like it's the real deal. So just trying to educate these folks, especially the young folks.
Right.
Yeah, and the old folks too, because they want everything lighter and stronger. It's everybody.
Plus, they're stuck in their old ways.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'd like to know next, like, do you have a favorite product? This might be more to, when you were in the climbing category
Yeah.
director, of like a favorite product that you've been part of personally.
I mean, I've been involved in some respects with a lot of stuff over 20
Right.
years, and again, I don't do the stuff. It's the team that does the work. But I mean, the cams, like all the cam creation has been cool. The Cobra was revolutionary at the time. The ice tool,
Right.
the helmets, the Creek 50 pack. Like there's all those things are cool. The big cams.
Yeah.
the monster cams is something to be proud about. Yeah, no, I'm fortunate that I've had my hands a little bit at least in
A lot of
of
different
products.
things.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of along the same line, but a different option. I was wondering if you ever had anything where you saw it and you thought, man, this is going to be huge. It's going to be great. And then when it went out into the real world, it just it didn't work out the way you thought it was
The
going
dogs, huh? Yeah, when it's a dog. I don't know if I can think of a particular product. I have an example of a situation that didn't go as well as I had hoped, and it was when the pandemic started and all the gyms weren't sure what they were going to do. I thought if we could distribute liquid chalk, because we make liquid chalk,
Right.
So that gyms would have more liquid chalk because they didn't want the chalk around,
Right.
And so the first thing we tried was to put liquid chalk in like a soap dispenser, like in a bathroom, and then
Yeah.
that didn't work. And we didn't think it was going to work, but we tried it because it just kind of coagulates
gets
in there, and
clogged up
it
in
gets
there,
clogged
right.
up. But then we found these great guys out east that had sort of helped us work on a formula and had something that actually worked on these dispensers. And I thought, this is going to be great. We're going to give all these things to these gyms, and everyone's going to be psyched, and it's going to be a whole great thing. And it didn't really take off how I had hoped. It was kind of an epic failure. I mean, the product worked, but it didn't really go anywhere. So
Right.
it was A for effort, but yeah, no go.
Along the same lines, how do you keep, especially now in your larger, more overarching position now? How do you keep like a tap on what people want out there?
Yeah, I mean that's our job.
Right.
That's like really the job of a lot of the people in this building. And I feel, with respect to climbing gear, I feel fortunate because we're climbing all the time.
Right.
So, and with Ellen out, I mean, we go to hard areas, you see what's going on, you go to mellow areas, we go to the gym all the time. So it's pretty easy to see what's going on out there, which is one thing. But then, me and the whole crew here, the guys and girls, we're talking to retailers. What do retailers want? We're talking to people at trade shows. People are telling us what they want. I mean, believe me, people tell me what they want.
Yeah, you probably have more of the opposite problem. Too many people telling you what they want.
What you need to do is this. Yeah, I get it. And then our job is to, is this commercially viable, and what's it going to take, and what's the ROI, and all that kind of stuff, because we are a business. But there's everyone in these certain categories, like the ski team, they're like more skiers, so they're like tapped into that world, and the climb team, and then the mountain team are more trail runners and backpackers and that sort of stuff. So that's our job, is we just are constantly out there and constantly talking to people, the retailers as well as users, we need to be careful that we don't create stuff just for us, right, because that's maybe not necessarily that commercially viable, so we need to balance that.
Yeah. And that's interesting. Like I said earlier to you, I talked a bit with Andrew McLean, who talked about, at the early days here, it was all about like,
what do we need?
What do we need? Yeah, exactly. And I was, it's kind of interesting that now that could be a large, like unintended consequence that like of those early days. If you have that, what do we need? Now it's became a completely different thing.
Yeah, Exactly. We need to be really careful. I always joke with my friend Josh Wharton, who's a BD athlete and a super badass alpinist, because this is the classic. He's like, hey KP, can you make left and right-handed peckers? And do you know what a pecker?
Yeah, of course.
And it's like, how many peckers we sell? Not many. And you want to make left and right-handed ones? Like, hey Josh, I'll buy you a bench grinder and you can do it yourself.
Make it yourself.
Yeah. So we need to balance out what do we need versus what is the greater world need. Yeah.
The pecker sales are low. The aid climbing pecker sales aren't real high compared to cam sales.
Left and right-handed peckers. Yeah, okay, Josh.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's really funny. What is the culture like these days? You were earlier when I sat down, you said that you were here at the end of Andrew's career here, and he talked some about what the culture was like. That it was people were passionate and people were willing to yell and scream that this is what it should be, and like stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know how the culture's changed. You've seen a lot of this. The modern times now, and those beginnings where Andrew and guys like that were still around.
Yeah, no, it has changed for sure. Like we're part of a big publicly traded corporation, right? So it's maybe more of a, nothing against the old days, but more of a serious business now, and we can't make the left and right-handed peckers necessarily, though sometimes we do, and then I get in trouble. But the culture, I would say, is similar. Like, believe me, people are pounding their fists and yelling and screaming that this is what we need to do.
There's a lot of passion. I can tell just, now when he's working at home a lot and he's on the phone. I mean, there's a lot of passion. There's a lot of the same kind of
people backing
excitement.
Their products.
And,
they think that's what it needs to be, what it should be.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And when I started here, I was amazed, one, with how young everyone was and how smart everyone was and how passionate they are. And the only thing that's changed is I'm now not young, and everyone else is, but the passion is still there, and the smart crackers in this building for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I wanted to know too. Do you feel that your teams have an advantage as designers or whatever their role is, being that they participate in the sports that they're working on?
For sure. And there's a little bit of a misnomer out there where everybody thinks that everybody at Black Diamond has to be some like hardcore athlete, and that's not true. I'm living proof of that. But there's certain roles in the building that you kind of have to know. Like the QA guys, when I ran QA, most of those QA guys, like when you're testing a cam or an ice tool or whatever, you got to kind of know not only how to use it, but how it's going to get misused and abused. And we're all a bunch of idiots out there doing stupid stuff all the time. So you need to take that into account, So is everyone here, do you have to be a user? No, absolutely not. In certain roles, it certainly helps that you're a user for sure. And that's how we end up getting this cool products.
Right.
Yeah.
So along the same line, I was kind of wondering, what do you think like Black Diamond's true strength is? Like, do you think it's that these guys are designing the gear? Do you think it's that you're such a great team together? Do you think that the way you're testing them and bringing products to the market? Like, what do you think the greatest strength
I think
is?
it's the answer is the question before. It's the fact that we have users using this stuff.
Using this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Because and like Ellen said, it is a lot of passion, because we're out there, and it's our friends out there. When we're testing stuff, when I was testing stuff, or when we're still testing stuff, I'm like, hey man, I'm gonna give this to my wife. We better
Right.
make sure it's right. Like this isn't.
He's belaying me on stuff.
Yeah, I'm always taking sketchy stuff. Hey, honey, check this out. She's like, oh god, But no, it's. I think the fact that we are, we're based on a bunch of passionate users working on this gear, and of course, I focus mainly on the climbing stuff because that's my longest history. But it goes across the board with the ski stuff, the mountain stuff, the apparel stuff. Our footwear guys. They're like footwear guys. You know what I mean? Like that's their thing. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And the apparel guys, talking the materials and all this stuff. Yeah, they're into it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
It's cool to be around people who are so passionate about what they do.
Yeah.
And I like that answer that it's, that passion and that experience is what, makes this place so successful.
Yeah. There's no phoning it in
Right.
around here. No, that doesn't work.
So a little step back, talking about the left and right-handed peckers. I had a question for you of how do you sort between that sort of stuff that's like, man, this is too specific, and this is for for three guys who are pushing the edge like that. That's great. But then like, how do you separate that from like what is a new innovative idea that might be good that you hear?
Yeah, that's all of our jobs in this place, right? So when we get pitched these ideas, or when someone comes up with an idea, or I come up with an idea, or Ellen or whoever, the job is to vet it, right? And there's a bunch of things that goes into that. It's actually more complicated than you may think. But is it actually something that people need? Okay. Is it actually manufacturable? All right. Is it from a business perspective? Does it make sense? Right? Left-handed peckers, maybe not. What's the tooling, amortization, like all this there's a lot that goes into the equation of, is this something that we think that we should do? You know, and there's different levers that you can pull and play some tricks in order to like make it work or not make it work. So, and ultimately, frankly, that's kind of ends up rolling up to be my job. Is this something that we're willing to stand there and go like, yeah, this is going to be rad. And it doesn't necessarily need to be some huge revenue generator, even though that's always nice. But we are a BD and we need to make cool stuff. We don't sell a lot of the big cams, but it's something that users needed.
Right.
They're like, hey man, it'd be nice if there was a cam bigger than a 6.
Right.
Everybody except Honnold said that. He said you just made the hollow flake lame. Which is true. But so we need to balance it out. There's a lot that goes into it.
Well, and on a broader perspective, like you said earlier, I'm sure you have a million people who come to you or come to members of your team and say, like, this is what needs to happen. We need this. So, I'm sure you get some crazy pitches too, but how do you hear the crazy ones and go, man, maybe there's some, a hint of gold in that? Yeah,
it's tough, and I try to be open-minded, but we do get some crazy ones.
So many, and I'm sure the volume's high too.
We get lots, and you want to be respectful when you're talking to these people because it's maybe their little passion project or whatever that they're working on, But again, it's kind of goes into the same formula. Is this something that our users need, or are they asking for, or do they just not know it yet? Who knows? And then is it, what's the commercial viability of this thing?
Right.
But we've definitely got we've had some pretty wild ones over the years, I think.
Do you remember any idea where somebody came up and you were like, man, this is just the craziest thing?
Well, I seem to remember something about trekking poles and like bear attacks, like some sort of sword knife mechanism, and I'm like, I don't know if we need to put like knives.
No, it
didn't make it. But
your bear spray in the handle of your
no, it wasn't
pole?
bear spray. It was I think it was like some sort of spear. And then there's a different idea with the trekking poles and like a thing to coil ropes, which maybe, but usually
right.
You just coil them a different way, and if you're coiling them, you don't even have your trekking poles with you. Yeah, I don't know. So, a lot of people bring some passionate ideas to the table for sure.
A little different step. I was wondering, what do you think the most common? This is from more of your quality control days. But what do you think the most common mistake people are making with their climbing gear? Like if you were to hope to be like, man, I hope people stop making this one mistake, what would it be?
That's a good question. I guess it's a little bit of a cop-out answer, but I think people probably use their gear a little bit too long.
Yeah.
Like ropes, I used to do that. Frankly, I probably still do that. Because that stuff's expensive, and people don't want to just keep burning through ropes. And I've seen people climbing on some tattered stuff.
Yeah.
So
Harnesses, belay loops worn.
harnesses. Yeah, I mean, like pro climbers wearing harnesses that are beat. I'm like, are you kidding me, guys? Like, come on. And I know, they're strong enough. They're probably going to be okay. There's been incidences here and there, the Todd Skinner, years ago. But I think in general, I would say people probably running their gear a little bit too long. On the other hand, gear can last a long time for sure if you take care of it and all that sort of stuff. But usually I would say people are climbing on ropes and draws and harnesses. So fabric stuff, that's probably a little bit beat.
When you said that, what came to my mind is, like climbing is this, always has been this kind of like contrarian deal that, like has some climbers often have this problem with authority.
Counterculture.
Right, exactly. But, it's kind of the same idea that when I'm out climbing and I see somebody who's doing something dangerous, what is, should you say something, should you not? For you specifically, when you see bad gear that is, that you maybe had a piece in designing and has now been used for the last, it was something you worked on your first day at BD and now somebody's still using that same piece, Do you feel... How do you feel when you see it? Do you feel like you should say something? What's your
Ellen's
approach?
been with me before. When I see something out there, whether it's gear or just people doing stuff kind of wrong or dangerous, like harnesses on upside down and stuff. I mean, I see that.
A lot.
A lot. I feel obligated to say something, and I usually. Sometimes I turn and run, but I usually probably say something nicely, and in most cases it's well received, though there's been the odd case where it hasn't been. Like I saw a guy at a gym a few years ago wearing a old BD harness, and the none of the buckles were doubled back. It was an old harness. And I was like, hey man, you need to double those. And he had nothing to do with it. He was like, get out of my face. No. He was not interested, and he just didn't know that was the kind of harness that you needed to double back, because you could tell he was a new climber, and this harness was 15 years old. And it wasn't a speed buckle, and he just didn't want to listen to me, and he didn't. He just walked away and told me where to go, and I was like, what can you do?
Yeah, I mean, you can't do anything if that happens, but I just think it's, adds another level to it where, like everybody who is an experienced climber can see people do things wrong, like put on gear in a wrong way or something like that. But I think it's interesting that it probably adds another level for you seeing, in addition to that, also like, somebody's quick draw that's been warned.
And I notice stuff
He
more than
notices things.
I notice things.
And he comes over
like when
and
I go to the
points it out to
gym,
you.
I'm like
Yeah,
in my own world,
training.
thinking about my thing, and he is like distracted by all the things that he sees and looking at the gear people are wearing and using, and all the time.
All the time. Yeah. Like clipping the chalk bag with the carabiner makes me crazy.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Why does that one specifically make you crazy?
So that one, I did a whole little article on it.
I'll have to check it out.
The reason it makes me crazy is I think people are making their life harder on them than they realize. Because if they're clipped the chalk bag to their haul loop with a beaner, it's now way lower than they want it to be, and it's flapping all over the place. Some people put it on a gear loop, it's all over. It's kind of just not where it's supposed to be. It's not convenient. And you see them up there struggling to find it, and I'm like, you're making your life harder than it needs to be.
Yeah.
Like, why not, there's a reason we sell it with a belt.
Right.
We sell it with a belt, and use the belt.
So that you can.
Well, yeah, you can. I mean, and there's a bunch of things. You can move it out of the way if you're in a chimney and you want it in the front, or if you're at a sport cliff and you take it off because you're going to lay down and have a nap or whatever. But having it hanging too low off a beaner.
And it leaves your haul loop open to use it for its designed purposes as well.
No, I got a problem with that one for sure. But I notice things at the gym. It's stressful.
Yeah. And then you come to Ellen and she comes over and whispers all the things that he's noticing, and is that how it goes? And you're like, dude, I'm just trying to climb right now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, I got to go talk to that person. I'm like, why?
That's usually why we go in the morning, because there's just less people than less for me to see.
So you mentioned a little earlier about that you're taking these products to your wife who's a climber, and that it makes it important. But I wanted to know a little deeper on that, how Ellen as a climber, and specifically as someone who climbs at a very high level, has influenced your work?
Well, I mean, it's all of us in here are not all of us. That's not fair. A lot of us are climbers, so the field testing aspect of what we're doing is really important, and Ellen's just been a part of that since day one. And some things, Ellen's a good field tester, and other things maybe not so much.
Like what? You want
Yeah,
to
I'd like to hear that as well.
One of the most important things when you're testing the gears, you need to understand who the consumer is. So when we're creating call it a beginner level harness, that's maybe not necessarily for Ellen.
Right.
But if she's wearing it and you're like, oh, I don't like the leg loop buckles or da-da-da, I'm like, yeah, but that's not really what it's for.
Right.
But if we have a sport harness, then Ellen's a perfect tester for that. And,
Right.
it's, the rise is off or the leg loops are too big or whatever it may be. So usually Ellen puts up with me a lot. I mean, basically it's been 20 years. I've never gone climbing and not had a piece of prototype gear on my harness. Like, we're always testing something.
Right.
Yesterday morning we were testing something at the gym and she's like, really? And I'm like, really? Eye roll and okay, we'll do it. So always trying stuff out, and so she's been very tolerant of the constant testing. And
I help.
You do help. No, you're very helpful.
You don't have to tell me specifics on the product, but what'd you end up thinking of the prototype from yesterday?
Well, it was a competitor product, and it was old school competitor product.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it was an old school competitor product.
I gave some good feedback about
Yeah.
how to. Yeah.
It was
yeah.
No, and that's fine.
No, it's okay. Ellen's just like, yeah, I don't know, So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's another
I
thing
gave
we
some
do
good
is
feedback
Yeah.
about
how it worked. Yeah.
and what didn't work.
Yeah.
It was fine.
So moving on now, I have some questions for you, and then at the end we'll bring them back. Again, feel free to jump in. I'm sure you've been there for a lot of the
jump
belaying.
I'm the belay master. I'm belay 514.
So, Pipe Dream in Maple Canyon here in Utah was
Yeah.
the route that was, made you the first Canadian woman to climb 514. Basically, I'd like to start by just wondering if you could tell me a little about the route itself.
Sure. So, first of all, it was over 10 years ago, so it was quite a long time ago. And I think, since then, it's really a popular place. So the Pipe Dream is this cave in Maple Canyon,
Right.
Utah, and it's conglomerate. It's super featured. It's endurance climbing, but it's quite physical. One of the things I like about climbing in that cave is you feel like you get a full body workout. So it's really fun climbing. So the Pipe Dream, the Pipe Dream is a route that starts on a 13D called the Sheepshagger. And Sheepshagger only goes kind of halfway out the cave, but then the Pipe Dream is an extension of that route. So it's full-on endurance.
I have a comment.
What's your comment?
The guy that did the first ascent of Wyoming Sheepshagger works here at Black Diamond. Matt Lund. There you go.
There you go.
Good to know.
Yeah,
That's
there you go.
awesome.
It's
Fun
a little,
fact.
little fun fact.
Yeah.
Years ago, 20 years ago probably, he did that thing.
Yeah.
A long time
That's
ago.
cool.
A long
Yeah.
time ago.
That's
Well,
really cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned conglomerate, which is exactly the word I would use having climbed in Maple Canyon. But for somebody who hadn't, how would you describe? It's a unique rock type. So how would you describe it?
It's like a big river bed that's
Got no water in it.
got no water in it, and it's all stuck together. There's big round cobbles, and they're all kind of stuck together, glued together. It's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes the cobbles come out, and so there's these little pockets that you can get in. So it's kind of pockety but cobbly. There's edges. It's very featured. It's friendly for shorter climbers like myself because there's always somewhere where you can push with your foot. A lot of climbing areas, it's nice, smooth, beautiful walls, but if you can't, it has limited features for your feet and hands. Maple is kind of the opposite. There's stuff everywhere, so there's a lot of options. There's a lot of dialing things in and figuring out what can work for you. And what makes the routes hard is really just linking them together and doing each move as efficiently as possible.
Right.
Because Pipe Dream's the extension, right? You didn't.
Yeah.
I cut you off.
Oh,
About
did I
the
not
Pipe
say
Dream.
that? Yeah, Pipe Dream's the extension of the Sheepshagger. So,
Right.
and it goes all the way out the cave. It's probably, I don't know how many bolts, 22 or something like that.
Wow.
It's pretty long.
Yeah, long for sure.
Yep.
My next question would be: Is Maple still one of your favorite places to climb? Is it one of your favorite places?
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
Climb? Yeah.
It's just fun, like
Yeah.
it's fun, and there's all grades there, and there's different angles, and yeah, it's just a really great place to be.
That's awesome.
But having said that, we've climbed at a lot of places all around the world, and I have a lot of other favorites.
A lot of favorites, but around
in
here?
terms of local places,
It's fun.
Yeah, it's just fun, and it's nice. Like it has a nice hang, and we bring our little spot pads, and you can lay down and watch other people climb, and it's just comfortable. And
Yeah, and in Utah, it's one of the few spots where you can climb in the summer.
Where it's cool. It's not 110 degrees.
it's
outside.
still 100, but it's
Yeah.
it's a little more forgiving.
Yeah.
Nice.
The rock's a little more forgiving than limestone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So a little like more in depth, a lot of climbers will never climb anything near that hard, anything near that level. And I think the average person, of course there's different routes where, a 513 or 514 on granite looks completely different. But like for somebody who understands climbing but is never going to touch a route or touch the holds on a route like that, what are the holds like? Like if you're going to describe what it's like for somebody who's never been to Maple Canyon, doesn't understand the cave, or doesn't understand what a hold on a climb like that's like, how would you describe it?
The pipe dream in particular, like the holds are surprisingly good. It's very, very steep, right? And like I said earlier, it's more about putting the moves together and linking everything than it is the individual moves. You're not going to be doing V8 or V10 or anything really that hard. If you took all the individual moves and put them down on the ground on a little boulder, it wouldn't be that difficult.
Right.
So you'd be surprised. So
It's the classic when people first get there and they like bolt to bolt a route like that, and they're like, oh yeah, this no problem.
No problem.
It's like, well, it's gonna be a problem because it's 30 bolts long.
22 bolts or whatever she said.
Yeah. So not all, like every hard route is graded, for a reason.
Right.
And those ones in particular, like I would say to folks, like, don't be afraid to check stuff out, because you never know. You never know what might suit you and what might not suit you.
I think it's kind of funny too that a little bit earlier when you were talking about it, you were like, "Oh, it's pretty steep," or you might have said even very steep. Like I've seen the cave; it's far beyond very steep. I would describe it as like it's more like climbing on a roof than it is like climbing on a wall.
Oh yeah, it's a cave.
Yeah, exactly. A true cave where somebody who may have never seen it might think like, oh, like very steep is like 90 degrees, but very steep is like.
Yeah.
Well, there's some sections you climb down, right? Like it's.
Yeah.
Little
I mean,
bit.
it's steep.
Yeah, it's steep.
Yeah,
There's
underselling
some way,
how steep it
It's
really
pretty
is.
And for a long ways. Yeah.
Right. Do you find that you said as a shorter climber you find that going there's always a place for your feet and things like that at there, but
Yeah.
do you think that long endurance style hard climbing is what you really excel at?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for
definitely.
sure. I'm not a super powerful climber, especially now, especially as I get older. I try. I'm working on it, but yeah, I mean, definitely the endurance style suits me a lot better.
But you can do the tech too.
I do like technical. I do
Yeah.
like technical climbing as well. Yeah.
What would be your well, and like you said, you like it. Do you have a favorite of styles? Is that endurance style still your favorite? Was it at one point your favorite? Is technical style your favorite? If you had to have just a favorite.
You know
Ellen
what?
likes
I
rock
like
climbing.
I like
Yeah,
rock climbing.
exactly. That's a great answer. That's a really great answer. Based on you saying that chaining the moves together and not the specific moves is a big part of it,
Yeah.
I would imagine that knowing the route would be incredibly key.
Yes.
Were you somebody who memorized the moves?
Yes.
And yeah. And then can you still remember any of the moves? Like when you think about it and sit down, could you remember like key sections or moves together?
On the routes there in particular, I can, but mostly because I still go there a lot,
Right.
and I watch other people, and there's a lot of link ups, and so overlap different sections.
Right,
so
where
I
you're
still
climbing
know
through
it.
that route, heading a different direction.
Exactly, or doing the same finishes. So for those routes in that cave in particular, I know most of them pretty good. Yeah. But there are routes that I've done, 5-6 years ago, and I can't remember exactly how I got through it. Even though at the time I was obsessed and I would like dream about them and think about them, and I would spend like weekends in a row on the same route. I'd have it all dialed at the time, but then after I sent,
Then some
it's
of them
gone.
fade away.
Some of them fade away and some of them stay.
Well, so on that same, like, you're talking, you're dreaming about it, you're thinking about it all the time. When you're approaching a hard route like that, what is your process? Like, if you could walk me through it, maybe like from kind of beginning till send, like what's your specific process?
Yeah, first, that's a good question. First, I mean, it depends where I am and if it's an area that I'm familiar with or not.
Right.
But if I have something picked out, I mean, the first thing is seeing if I can do all the individual moves. And a lot of the harder routes that I've done, I haven't necessarily gotten to the top the first time, or
Cool.
I've like been able to pull through the hard sections and look at the moves, but not actually do them until some point later.
Right.
And actually, that's one of my favorite things about sport climbing is that process of figuring out the moves, not just being able to like do the move, but being able to do it efficiently. And something that was impossible when you started becomes like cool and doable,
Right.
based on like subtle hip positions and things like that. So the first is like figuring out all the moves, and then it's linking different sections. And sometimes that means you got to, go up part ways, actually take, and then link, link overlapping sections, not just
Right.
going from the bottom as high as you can each time. Otherwise, you're gonna make better progress if you like lower a few moves from where you fall and practice going
Right,
through
through
that
it.
and get it in your head. And always kind of going to the tops of routes, even if it's really easy at the top, you want to make sure that you have that dialed so that once you get through that hard section, there's
right.
no question.
No excuse to fall. Right.
Absolutely.
Do you have a sense when you're like I'm close, this is gonna be sendable, or sometimes is it like you're struggling and then you go for a burn and it goes the whole way? What's it like, the actual, well, in a second I'd like to ask you what the feeling of success is like, but like do you have an idea before you're gonna be successful, or does sometimes it just happen?
Most times I
Do you
know
know?
if I'm close or if
Right.
I'm not close. Yeah.
But
Most times.
Are there times when you surprise yourself and you're able to climb much farther, or like
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're
All of a
almost
sudden
to the
you're at the
top? Yeah.
chains and you don't even know what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of it has to do with the belayer. Belayer doesn't get any credit. Come on.
Colin is, I will say, very supportive
Yeah.
when I have projects and very patient, and he does help me a lot.
And a good belayer.
And a good player.
Well, and so then my next question is kind of for both of you. First, for you, Ellen, like what's that feeling of success like? And then for you, Colin, like when you watch her succeed, what's that feeling like for you?
Sometimes when you do a route, it's all a blur. Like you don't even know what just happened. Like you're so in the moment that like I've done a route before and it's like, did I take or did I just do it? Like because you're so in the zone.
Yeah.
It's like an incredible feeling, and it's something that I'm always kind of chasing after, is that feeling of being in the moment and being so focused on what's in front of you and not even kind of realizing what's going on.
And for you, what's it like when you watch her, make it to the top and
Well, when she makes it to the top, I'm psyched, of course, but I get stressed out because I know she wants to do it and I know she can do it, and I mean it's nerve-wracking. Especially if she's made it through, say, the crux.
Yeah.
And, a couple more bolts to go, I'm like, just going to throw up.
Really?
Yeah, even though I know she can do it. It's exciting.
Well, and it's, I think it's cool the way that you've been able to support her in that way, because I know that a lot of couples, there's a lot of couples who climb really well together, but then there's a lot of, maybe less professional couples or lower level couples that when they go climbing together, it's
not good.
screaming.
It'd be
match.
better
Yeah,
if they were
exactly.
Yeah.
One of them's like, just grab that hold, or just stand up already, and
No, well, I'm lucky, and we do climb well together, and we climb. Well, we used to climb at the same walls more, but now that I'm always injured. But it's nice when you're out in the mountains, because we do a lot of stuff in the mountains, and when there's a hard pitch, I'm like, hey, honey, like, this one's all you.
The crux pitch, you're heading up.
It's great. I'm winning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
And then I'd like to ask what first of all, what you would advise, Ellen, to somebody who just wants to get better, like at any level of climbing, whether it's their first day or they've been doing it for 10 years. What would you recommend for somebody who wants to get better?
Okay. Well, there's a lot of emphasis on training these days, which is great. But climbing is really a skill sport, and a lot of people that are out there are already plenty strong physically to do a lot of the harder, or to improve on their climbing, and it's more a matter of climbing a lot, climbing different types of rock, just getting more experience on the rock itself, getting mileage. Yeah. And then the other thing that I would say is climbing with real intention and purpose, and observing what other people are doing and how they're climbing and what they could do differently to climb better. Not just getting through a pitch, but also thinking about how could I have done that move more efficiently? How could I, how should I be breathing better? And just climbing with real intention and thinking about what you need to do it better.
Well, and I really like that idea of climbing with intention. Do you think that it should be just like an overall intention, or like, are you even saying like, man, I should do some small goal every time? Or, do you think about it that way, or do you just think like, oh man, I need to make sure that I'm checking off all my list of everything that makes me a better climber every time?
I mean, I don't know that you can think about everything every time.
Right, not everything, but I mean,
like even when you're going out for a day, or even like to the gym or whatever, and even when you're warming up, like think about some things that you want to work on as you're warming. Like it's not just a warm up; it's also, let's practice my footwork, practice my flow. Think about how quickly I'm moving, how slowly I'm moving, how gripped am I, all those kinds of things.
Right.
You can really improve a lot in your warm-ups and learn things that way. So just kind of always having like, I do think it's good to have some sort of higher objective to, what you're trying to accomplish that day. Like when I go to a crag and I'm like, okay, after my warm-ups, I want to, like I'm working on a project, I might have a goal of, I want to get to a high point or whatever that may be. But the bigger part of it is not like, hey, did you get through the route? But it's kind of like, okay, what kinds of things did I do well? What kinds of things could I do better in terms of body positioning and breathing and all that sort of thing.
And then another deal, I liked what you said as well about observing other climbers, and I liked kind of that you said you almost, not to put words in your mouth, but it seemed like you were thinking about it not just watching other climbers who are better than you, but watching other climbers who aren't as good as you, and
100%.
thinking like, what would I do?
Right.
What tips would you have while observing another climber of like, is it just you're looking at them and going like, how would I do it better? Or what are you looking for when you're watching another climber?
I'm just trying to get some ideas on, and it's not necessarily how I would do it different, because everybody's different, has different strengths and
Body
weaknesses and
types,
different body
everything,
types.
right.
So like the way that Kolin does something is not going to be the best way for me, but like I can still think about, how could he make that easier for himself? Like I see that he's gripped out of his mind, and he shouldn't, he's going to be too wasted to do a move
Usually.
5 moves after that. So like, where can he relax? Where can he not relax? When does he need to turn it on?
Yeah.
When does he need to turn it off? So like, thinking about what is best for him also helps me understand what's best for me, if that makes any sense.
Right, definitely. And then a step further, you know, that was kind of our advice for your advice for overall climbers. I wonder if you had any more specific advice for someone who wants to climb at a really high level, like, you know, 13s, 14s, and that are maybe they're on the edge of getting to that area, but they aren't there yet.
I think it comes down to, like I said, just climbing as much as you can on rock and getting some variety. Like not just climbing, like don't just pick one specific route as your goal and that's all you ever get on. I don't think that's going to make you a better climber. It might allow you to climb that one particular route, but it's not the best way to become a better climber in general. So climbing on different types of rock, different angles, I think that's important too. Like I mean, it depends on your goal, but I think it helps to develop your skills in slab and steep climbing, and, you know, different styles will help you overall to become a better climber.
As you've, Colin, watched Ellen get better at climbing, you know, over the years, was there anything that you saw that was like, wow, this was something that, you know, really helped her climb better?
I mean, I guess I'll just kind of repeat what she said. We've been fortunate enough that we travel quite a bit, you know, on our 1-year honeymoon, and then even now, you know, we climb all the time, all weekends, trips, all our vacation. So just climbing on all the different kinds of rock, I think, is really what has allowed Ellen to excel and me to not excel. But I'm maybe not as bad as I say, but I'm definitely not great. And then also her headspace is really good. Yeah. So we don't really top rope that much, and Ellen has never really top roped that much. Kind of you got to earn to get up there, and I think that makes you a better climber. And so when you're kind of sketched out way above the bolt or some gear or whatever, I think that really helps as well.
And I just want to say, it's not that I get scared. Like, I'm not comfortable all the time. Like, I get scared.
No, of course, but you can dial it in and do it. I mean, Ellen mainly sport climbs, and sport climbing is generally safe-ish. You know, could take some big whippers and stuff, but it's still practice. You know, being comfortable, busting the moves above the bolt, kind of thing.
Well, yeah, and you know, just because it's generally safe and someone who climbs a lot understands that doesn't mean that you know when you're 10 feet above that bolt, your body's not telling you like you know can't let go, you can't let go.
Yeah.
And I think that brings up an interesting point. Do you have anything that, like, is it just that you have this mental fortitude, or do you have, you know, do you ever practice? Because, like, I think that's something that's interesting that our higher level climbers now out there, and like you interact with them more than I do, but are now thinking about things like, you know, in ways like sports psychologists do, whereas, you know, NFL players and stuff like that have been doing it for years.
Yeah.
So I just was wondering, it brought up an interesting deal of like, do you have a specific headspace that you're trying to get into, or is that just naturally your headspace? Is it that you're, you know, like you said, you were chasing that flow state climbing?
Yeah.
Is that where you're finding success with that, or is it just happen?
I mean, that's a big part of it. I mean, you still need to have an awareness of what's safe and what's not safe, right? Sometimes you get so caught up in the moment that you forget that. But, yeah, I mean, there's different components around a good headspace, you know, whether it's leading or whether it's just being able to concentrate on what's in front of you. And that's actually, both of those kind of come hand in hand, right? Like, if you're focused on the body position and the moves and whatnot, you almost forget that you're above your bolt at times.
Right.
So, and then also, like, if you're, you know, as you get physically stronger and you have more confidence, then a lot of it's just confidence and believing in yourself and believing that, you know, knowing that you can hang on to certain holds that are coming up, and you just need to get through this one section, knowing that that's coming up.
And it's practice too. Like, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Are there any trips, you know, besides the honeymoon trip, of like trips that just stand out still that you guys are like, man, this is somewhere we went that I love, or a great story, you know, something like that? I
was thinking that every trip I take with Ellen is the best trip ever, like to the gym yesterday. Right, honey? We've gone on a lot of trips
Yeah.
I mean, there's two things we do in our life. We work and we climb. And so the 1 year honeymoon trip is hard to beat. You know,
Right.
we climbed Denali years ago, which was a really different thing. Cotopaxi was great. Lots of trips to Europe, you know, sport climbing trips. Oftentimes when we go to Europe, we do like kind of easier multi-pitch trad and sport stuff, and Switzerland and stuff. We've had some great trips. Kalimnos, Slovenia with friends. I mean, we have so many friends. It's really the people that make the trip, you know. But
Right.
they've all been, even bad trips can be memorable. Like when you get rained out for the whole time or whatever. Sardinia maybe wasn't the best.
No.
That was our worst travel to pitch ratio trip. We barely climbed at all. We had really bad weather, but that was still fun. It was our 20th wedding anniversary. I forget.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a great climbing trip, but we had a nice time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of something you mentioned there is like really the truth too, and not just, you know, when you're rained out or whatever it is, but sometimes the trips that end up being the most miserable are the ones that are the most memorable, you know.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
The ones that everything goes off perfectly are sometimes less memorable than
Yeah.
the ones
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
you know,
We've been
have
fortunate.
some suffering.
We've had a lot of good times.
Yeah.
Lots of good trips.
And Colin used to travel a lot for work to
Yeah.
Europe, and so I would usually tag along, and then we'd
Bolt on a
make a
climbing
vacation
trip.
out of
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
or a climbing trip. So
And we go
That's
back
worked out
home a
really well.
lot to, you know, Calgary, Canmore area, and the Bugaboos is one of my favorite spots. We've had incredible trips in there, and yeah, I mean,
Any trip in the Bugaboos that really stands out?
well, I really wanted to do. Why are you laughing?
because I know what you're gonna say.
Well, the Becky Chenard. I mean, I wanted to do the
Yeah.
Becky Chenard my whole life, and we went in there years ago and did that thing and had the whole route to ourselves. It was a splitter day, and just it was awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of my kind of thing. Yeah, it was really fun. But yeah, I mean, we were just really fortunate to be able to climb a bunch.
Colin likes to do a lot of the big mountain kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
I appreciate that it gets me outside of my little sport climbing comfort zone. But I would have never done a lot of the things that we do, and I'm so grateful. And I do think it even helps my general
think it
rock
helps.
climbing, just doing a lot of the things that we've done.
And I'd never fallen before. I'd never fallen ever before we met and when you took me sport climbing. So it goes both ways. You'd never ice climbed. You'd never winter camped.
Yeah.
Climbed Denali. Yeah.
I really like, it sounds like you guys are a good team, because I like the way that, you know, you're like, you, Ellen, were saying that you like the way it's pushing you, and then I just flashing back to earlier in the conversation when then I can imagine Colin gets to the, you know, some pitch, and like, I don't like the way this
Oh yeah.
looks. So yeah,
No, it's
your
great.
turn.
Yeah. No, it's amazing.
It's like having an ace up your
No,
sleeve
it's
the whole
like
time.
it's awesome. Yeah, you're just like, well, this looks hard, honey. It's all you. I'm lucky.
That's fantastic. So one thing that actually came into my mind, I have two more questions, I think, for each of you. While we were sitting here, I was wondering, Colin, and if you don't know off the top of your head, no worries, but I was wondering why when the Z4s came out, this
Yeah.
popped into my head,
Yeah.
why you stopped at the .75 and didn't continue to, you know, the 1 or the 2 or wherever.
Yeah, I mean, basically, there's not really a need. Like the 1s and the 2s are actually pretty darn perfect, frankly. I mean, the best camel ball all time is the number 2 camel
Of
ball,
course,
you know?
yeah.
Which Honnold would deny because you don't need a number 2, it's just perfect hands, you know?
Yeah, the rest of us don't agree,
Yeah, it's just like,
yeah.
I want to place it. But yeah, when we you know, we look at the math and we look at what people need and where volumes are, and then also does the technology help? You know, the Z4 has a certain technology. Do you need that technology there? And does it make the most sense? So that's why we
You
took
just
them
felt
down
that
really small,
Right.
you know, and then took them up to the 7.5.
Nice.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then I was wondering if you had a piece of gear that, you know, whether it was a prototype or whether it made it in production, that when he brought it to you, you were like, you know, it ended up being like, man, this is the thing. Like, this is going to be great.
This is a great question.
Well, there was that belay device that never went anywhere, but we thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, that's true.
We really liked it.
Yeah, you really liked it. That didn't make it to market.
It didn't make it to market, though.
Yeah. But what about something that did make it to market?
I mean,
Pipe Dream Pack? You love that.
Pipe dream pack. I mean, yeah, that's not really a piece of
Classic.
gear.
Of course it is. It's all gear.
The harnesses are great. I mean, yeah, there's nothing. I'm trying to think.
God, my whole life. and there's
Well, everything is
nothing
good.
that-
Everything is good.
Yeah, it's a compliment. Every prototype is just
You like the
too
vapor
great.
helmet when you wear it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then, like I said, I think one more for each of you. Do you, Colin, when you're climbing yourself, feel that, like, I just like would imagine that, the sense of accomplishment of building these things is great, but I would imagine that it must be a pretty unique and cool feeling to be like, placing a cam in the wall and be like, man, this was, I took this from conception through finishing.
Yeah, well, I don't do anything. Once again, the team does it. But it is when you see in the movies, and whether it's Free Solo or Tommy on the Don Wall or any of that stuff, or photos of friends, when you see all these athletes that I happen to know, because I'm fortunate enough because I work in this world, when you see them using the gear that you had something to do with, it's kind of cool. Like, for sure it's cool. It blows your mind. But then it's also kind of hits home that, like, this is the real deal. Like Tommy on the portal edge, or placing, the Z4s and stuff like that. Like, it's these guys are hanging it out there often, alpine climbers and stuff like that. So yeah, it's rad. Like, oh, check out that. We had something to do with that helmet. But then it's also an eye opener,
Right.
and it keeps us all in check for sure, because it's the real deal.
You see stuff out there all the time, though. Like, you get some random magazine, or there's an ad, on the highway with physical climber, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
there's a BD helmet. No,
Yeah.
there's.
Yeah, I
there's
notice.
this
I
harness
notice
and-
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And then basically what I wanted to ask for my last question for you, Ellen, was kind of what it's like for you from that kind of same perspective of like, man, he's designing all these things for something that I like to do.
Yeah.
What's that feel like for you?
I mean, I just feel really lucky that you get to work in this industry that I'm so passionate about,
Right.
from the hobby side.
Yeah.
And BD's just, climbing in general is just blowing up, right?
Right.
Like, and it's used to be kind of this, I don't know, counterculture, small group of people that were climbing when we started even 25 years ago. And now just like with the Olympics and the gyms, the gym thing and the kids, that they're just incredible, and they're such accomplished climbers.
Yeah.
And then, that just seeing the growth of the industry, and then Black Diamond's influence over that is really exciting. It's exciting that we're a part of that.
Creating the future, baby.
That's
That's
right.
what we do.
That's right.
That's what we do.